Okay, we're in the middle of Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. We're part 10 of chapter 80. So let's bring up the text. Hold on a second. Okay, here we are. We're holding. It's a little slow in the text here. We're holding law number 31. One second. Okay, we're holding law number 31. So the halacha says like this. Besula, which means a girl who's not married yet. Asur, and I think he's referring to in this. So Besula, a girl who's not married yet. Let's see why. Asura likloya sare seha b'Shabbos is forbidden to braid her hair on Shabbos. See, one is not allowed to braid their hair for girls to braid their hair on Shabbos. Leila hater kli asa, if her hair was braided before Shabbos, obviously, she can't undo her braid on Shabbos. We'll see why in a second. Aval yochayla lisakin sariseh b'yadeh, she can use her hands to fix her hair. Ubimasrei ka'asuya misar chazer, and if she has a brush made up of hard, like they called it hard hog hair. If it's a kind of, the concern is it's going to pull out the hair. So if you use a brush that pulls out hair when it brushes, so that's a problem. But if she's going to use one of these hard brushes that doesn't, it's like made out of hog hair, so it doesn't pull out the hair when they brush their hair, which would be forbidden to pull out hair on Shabbos. So then those kind of brushes she could use as well. Sorry. Sorry. If it's a hard brush that it's impossible that it would not pull out hair, it means it would definitely pull out hair. So if it's a short thing that's going to pull out the hair, is also the sarik, but you cannot comb your hair, brush your hair with such a kind of brush. The soft brushes that won't pull out the hair. And I'm sure, Rebecca, you know that they have, I think they sell now for Shabbos, the young girls have these special brushes that are Shabbos permitted. Is mutaris the sakamai sarasera, she can organize her hair with these brushes that won't pull out the hair on Shabbos. And certainly if it's permitted, if this brush was set aside especially for Shabbos. Okay, so let's just see what we're talking about here. So footnote number 116. The Shulchan Aruch 303, Law 26, and Masechet Shabbos 94, which is talking about braiding and unbraiding hair on Shabbos. According to most poskim, most opinions, this is a shavus. Okay, so this is not an outright prohibition or even rabbinic. It's a shavus. We're going to go through in a second the different levels of Shabbos Melachos of acts we cannot do on Shabbos. I put up a small chart for that. Hopefully it doesn't freeze this week. The Rabbanan prohibited this because it is similar to baina building. Making a braid would be like creating something. Braiding a wig is also considered weaving, one of the Melachos. So one should not even, means the halacha over here says about a young girl who's a besula, meaning referred to she's not married and her hair is not covered. Even if you have a wig, one should not do it. It's considered weaving. Since it may not be considered permanent, it is a shvus and not a deraisa. Why is it considered a rabbanon, rabbinic, and not biblical? Because you're not allowed to biblically create or weave on Shabbos, is because it's not permanent. Obviously, no one braids the hair forever. So it's not 100% building, but it's a rabbinic issue. Okay, on Shabbos, you must not undo it as well. This is a Tosfos in Shulchan Aruch 303.26. 118 is about doing with your hands, organizing with your hands. The Ramah in 303 says she can also put her hair in a tiara or put ribbon in the hair on Shabbos. That's permitted. It's just the braid, which is creating, which is forbidden. 119, he says, it should be a special. It should be special for Shabbos, so it should not look like uvda dechol. Why do we say that it's better to have the brush that is a special Shabbos brush to show that you're not doing, again, there's another concern. Another concern on Shabbos is where it's not a prohibition, but we don't do things as we do in the week. So even combing one hair kind of falls into that, although there's also reasons to comb your hair so it shouldn't be messy. But it's kind of a weekly thing. So therefore, by having a special brush for Shabbos, it takes care of that issue. He quotes the Pri Megadim and the Mishnah Brura. 120 is okay. About it's certainly permitted if it's set aside for this purpose. So here he says in the footnote as follows. The wording is somewhat unclear. The halacha is that even a soft brush is permitted only to flatten down the hair a little, but it is forbidden to comb or brush even with a soft brush, because again, you may still pull out you could pull out some hair. It is forbidden to do anything to your hair with a hard brush at all, because the hard brush will have automatic effect. See Shulchan Aruch 303:27 Mishnah Brura. A wig should not be straightened with a comb, but with fingers. I believe. I'm not an expert in the shaitels, obviously. I'm not sure. I think it's something a Shabbos. I think there's these like a wide wood comb. I think it's called a shaitel comb. I'm assuming it's a Shabbos thing, or maybe just to also protect the shaitel. But I think it's also used for Shabbos. And again, I'm not always around to see that. But it says over here, a wig should not be straightened with a comb, but with fingers. So says the Iglital, the Gozit, the Gzozis. See Ramah 337.2, Mishnah Brura. If it's possible to be machmer, one should be machmer, to be careful in this as well. So Rebecca, do you have any insight from your years of studying on this topic? Aaron, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, okay. Three things. Can you undo a braid or not in
No.
your hair? Can you make a bun? And what happens if your hair just, lots of girls, hair just falls out. So touching your hair, you're not getting bald or anything, but just commonly falls out.
I don't know. If here's falling out like it happened, unfortunately, is nothing you could do about that. But if you were talking about undoing a braid is not allowed, and to it's he says that one should use a special brush for Shabbos that is only used for like lightly, not to brush hardly through it so it shouldn't pull out any of the hairs.
Rabbi, what was your question to me exactly?
I'm saying in school, I know they teach the girls. Well, do you have any insight you want to add to brushing hair on Shabbos?
Um, well, I just know that you're not allowed to do anything that would cause hair to fall out or possibly cause hair to fall out.
And
Um,
so do you have like a special Shabbos comb or something?
so I have curly hair. I have very curly hair, so I don't brush my hair, but yeah, I think like from women who brush their hair have like a special brush to use on Shabbos, like a more gentle kind of brush that won't pull out hair.
Yeah, so that's basically what he's saying here. Excellent. Thank you so much. Yes,
But
Barbara. Okay,
but
sorry. Go ahead,
oh,
Rebecca.
but regarding I think last week you were talking about like hairspray and hair products. I've seen like very from women use hairspray and things like that on Shabbos, so there must be like multiple opinions or like ways in which it is okay to do it.
I don't remember talking about that. It was another class with someone else. But
No?
it doesn't mean that I didn't talk about it. My memory's not great. I have to check. I have to check. I'm not certain about that. I know people do use some sort of hairsprays on Shabbos. I know
Right.
in the
Okay.
80s it was very popular. Yes, Aaron.
I think I remember because I have a girl, but they
Daughter.
have Shabbos makeup, and I know that when you do a wedding, like they put the stuff in, your hair doesn't move, so like you could sleep in it.
Very good. Hold on a second. I skipped over Barbara. Barbara.
Is it all right to pull your hair back with like a rubber band or something like that, a hair tie, a scrunchie?
Yeah, so that's what Aaron was asking before. Yeah, so he says like to put in a bow, which is similar. Anything you're going to do that's not going to braiding is like creating something. It's literally braiding the hairs together or weaving. The so to put it into a bun or something, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Yes, Aaron.
The reason I brought it up is because I saw some video they were describing about people who don't wear a wig, or people who even it could be a wig as well, but they were saying people don't shave their hair off with women, and they put on a handkerchief, so they always put it in a bun. So on Shabbos, why would you do it any differently?
No, you can. The question is about Barbara's asking bun versus braiding, if I understand Barbara correctly. I want to go over now. There's just an opportunity. It's not specific to where we're holding, but just we've been talking about the Rabbanan, the Raisa, biblical, rabbinic shvus. So just to break down quickly, we should have done this maybe at the beginning of this chapter of how do we define the different prohibitions of laws on Shabbos. So number one is, of course, melacha da'araisa, a biblical melacha on Shabbos. Definition is an activity that explicitly or implicitly forbidden by the Torah on Shabbos, based on 39 melachos, the Avos melachos. There's 49 melachos in Mishnayos Klal Gadol that is derived from the Mishkan tabernacle, meaning to say what they did in the tabernacle as any kind of work defines what is work, and the Mishnah divides it into 39 different activities that are forbidden on Shabbos biblically. There's what's called Av Melachos, the father Melachos. So he says the subcategories. There's the Av Malacha, which is the primary category. In other words, writing, cooking, lighting a fire. And then you have the subcategory, which is called a tulda, an action similar to in purpose or method to the Av. In other words, erasing to write, frying as a form of cooking, etc. So it's not exactly what they did in the tabernacle. That's what's called a tulda, so to say. The word tulda here he translates a subcategory, but the actual tulda means a child. An av would be a parent, and the tulda would be a child. So the av is the primary activity that's forbidden on Shabbos, the 39. Of those, there's many tuldas, subcategories of each of the 39. Halacha status, fully Torah prohibition. No matter what, whether it's a tulda or an av, it's a prohibition on Shabbos, punishable theoretically by stoning, which is skila, or karis, if intentional, or chatas offering of unintentional, meaning in temple times you'd have to bring a sacrifice. The difference between av melacha and tolda melacha could be in a situation where you have to bring a sacrifice, how many sacrifices you have to bring if you did many subcategories within one category. But as far as the sin and the prohibition goes, there's no difference between a tolda, a subcategory, or a biblical primary category. Yes, Rebecca.
But in order to be chayav like that, didn't you have to do it in front of two witnesses and in public, and also be warned that it's usur?
Yes, that's referring to the punishment. The punishment is the warning and the witnesses and all that. But as far as the prohibition goes, that doesn't change the fact. In the difference would be obviously if it's mazid, if it's intentional, or shoygig, or unintentional. So, and then you're right. Then there's a difference between what kind of punishment, whether it's kares, misa, or unintentional is to bring a sacrifice. But that doesn't change the end of the day that it's a prohibition, a biblical prohibition. Again, difference between av melach and tolda. Now, the famous Rabbi Shmuel, who wrote in his notebook that he feels he's going to have to bring a shogeg when Mashiach comes. He lived over 2,000 years ago, so he penciled into his notebook that he felt he maybe did a unwilling a transgression that would obligate him to bring a sacrifice, a chatas. So he put a note that when Mashiach comes, he's going to bring it. So that one could do if one likes, if God forbid you ever do a transgression on Shabbos. But we're talking about the actual, to know what you are doing and what is its level of prohibition. There's biblical prohibitions, and in the biblical prohibitions, there are 39 activities that were done in the tabernacle that are the primary ones, and they have many subcategories, but they're still biblical as well. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, in today's times, just use me as an example. So I didn't live a religious life at one point. So am I responsible for anything?
When Mashiach comes in here, God willing, soon, there is the concept of bringing. Today, you could do tshuva. We do tshuva and other methods. There is the idea of a korban, of a sacrifice, but it's a different. If it's a different, I'm going to just put you on mute because there's a lot of noise.
Oh yeah. I'll put.
So there's just a difference if you would have to bring one sacrifice because your lack of knowledge was one. It means it wasn't like you didn't know all the laws or specifics. You just didn't know the laws of Shabbos. So therefore, the halacha goes into how many sacrifices do you have to bring a sacrifice for each time you did a prohibition, or just because you had one lack of knowledge. So in your case, it would be just one lack of knowledge. There was just no knowledge of Shabbos. So it's really one sin could be really one thing that would need rectifying, if you want to say that, though you're not responsible, you didn't know. But if you wanted to bring a korban to get rid of that unknown prohibition violation, it would fall into the category of one has to examine if it's the lack of knowledge is only one. You didn't know the laws of Shabbos. So therefore, it wasn't like every Shabbos you violated Shabbos. You never knew it was a single lack of knowledge. The Mishnah discusses that. Okay, so that's the first category. First category is the Daraisa biblical prohibitions that are broken up in two categories, the 39 primary and the subcategories of the Tolda. Number two is the Melacha D'Rabbanan, rabbinic prohibitions. What's the definition of a rabbinic prohibition? Actions not forbidden by the Torah, but restricted by Chazal. Our rabbis, Chazal meaning our rabbis, to prevent Shabbos violations or preserve its sanctity. So there's two levels within the rabbinic. One is that the rabbis were concerned that certain activities would lead to a biblical activity, or certain activities are not Shabbostic. So here he gives the reasons. One reason is what's called, he breaks it up into different reasons they would put on these extra prohibitions. One is a gzeira. A gezerah means offense to prevent Torah violation. In other words, squeezing fruit may lead to extracting juice. So if we don't want you to extract juice, which is a biblical, so the rabbis put a fence to not even squeeze the fruit so the juice shouldn't come out. So that's an example of a gezerah of the rabbis to fence off to protect the biblical prohibition. Then you have what we learned before about, that's why I mentioned it, about the brush of uvdin dachol, something that's a weekday-like actions, inconsistent with Shabbos spirit. Means it's not we're concerned that you're going to violate Shabbos, but that it's too weekly and therefore it takes away from the spirit of Shabbos. This would go into the question that we've raised over the time about preparing, going to a ball game on Shabbos, in a way that you figured out a way it's permissible on Shabbos. So even if you figured out a way to make it permissible as far as the prohibitions of Shabbos goes, and it's very difficult that should be the case. But hypothetically, if it was, it wouldn't be. It's not Shabbos dik. Then you have what's called zilzal Shabbos, disrespecting the holiness of Shabbos, which is even more, which is in actions that are inappropriate. For instance, asking a non-Jew to do malacha, amir l'nachir, that's playing musical instruments on Shabbos, or muktzah, handling certain items, could come under the zilzal. Or there's other reasons. Muktzah, he puts it in the category too broad. But there's things that are considered disrespect for Shabbos. Difference between disrespect and uvin l'chol is something weekday-like is not necessarily disrespectful for Shabbos. It's just not in the spirit of Shabbos. Okay. Shavuos. What is a Shavuos? We just mentioned before that I think it was about combing was a Shavuos. It says a special classic rabbinic Melachos, generally passive, non-productive activities forbidden due to the above rabbinic concerns. Okay, what is a Shavuos? Types of Shavuos Gomer, a plain rabbinic prohibition not related to any melacha. Example, climbing a tree on Shabbos. So climbing a tree on Shabbos possibly could be considered a Shavuos, and therefore it's not done on Shabbos. Shavuos, a double rabbinic prohibition, meaning asking a non-Jew, which is the first Shavuos, to do a rabbinically forbidden act, the second Shavuos, like bringing something from outside an Eruv, if no Torah level if no Torah level Rishus Rabbim, means to do something that's on its own not is rabbinic. Let's say a Carmelist or something, to take it from a non-public domain but not exactly a private domain, and asking a Gentile to do it. So that's, let's say, to bring the paper into the house, etc. So that's a shvus. Something permitted in cases of great need. Sometimes a shvus we're more lenient, tzarich gadol, or if it's a mitzvah, or if it's illness not life-threatening, chola she'ein by sakana. Then he has one more over here, is malacha she'ein tzricha leguf. on Shabbos is a definition is what? A action or malacha done not for its original it's not for its original Mishkan purpose, even although the action is biblically defined. He said, let's see what he means. Status, a Melachos, Tanim and Rishonim, it's the Hebrew words. Rambam, still a Torah prohibition. Rabbi Shimon, many poskim only rabbinic. Example, dragging heavy bench that marks a pharaoh in the ground unintentionally. So that could be something that could be possibly a Melacha she'ein tzrich l'guf. What's the definition? They put it a little more difficult. Melacha she'ein tzrich l'guf could be possibly something that's forbidden on Shabbos, but you're not doing it for the way it's being done. For instance, you want to drag a bench on Shabbos. So your intention is just to get the bench from point A to point B. While you're dragging the bench, you're digging in the ground, which is like a form of plowing on Shabbos, which is forbidden. But you have no interest in making a hole in the ground. Hypothetically, if you're able to drag the bench without making a hole in the ground, you'd be more than happy, or maybe even more happy. But it's inevitable. So here, the malach itself, you have no interest in what's happening, but you're causing it to happen by dragging it. So that could be a question if it's what's the level if it's considered Torah prohibition or if it's only rabbinic. Then you have davar she'enoi mitkaven psik reisha, something. Melachos she'ein tzrich l'gufa means really dragging heavy bench that makes okay. Here a davar she'enoi mitzkaven, something that you're not intending, or psik reisha, something like we said before that's inevitable. For instance, davar she'ein mitzkaim, unintentional result, doing an action that might, not for sure, but might result in melacha. Rabbinically forbidden unless the result is unlikely and unintended, both mamish unlikely or just there's a difference in might or unlikely. Psik reisha is an inevitable result, doing something where malacha is guaranteed, even if unintentional. For instance, to cut off the head of a chicken, to play with the head of the chicken, is going to kill the chicken, even though you're not looking to kill the chicken. But that's called psik reisha v'layamas. It's like a question mark. If you take off the head, will the chicken not die? Of course it will die. So there are melachos and Shabbos. There are things you could do. You could say, well, I have no interest in doing that. But it's impossible to do it without doing a prohibition on Shabbos. He says generally forbidden minatorah. It's biblically a prohibition. He says the melacha is not beneficial. It's nichele. The person doesn't have any interest in it. Nevertheless, it's impossible. It shouldn't happen. The result is not wanted. Possibly only rabbinic in such cases. Okay. Then we have grama. Grama is one more, which is indirect, and it's something that's indirect. For instance, you're causing something to happen. Causing a malacha indirectly, not through normal direct action. So it's rabbinically prohibited on Shabbos, unless for great need or mitzvah, more lenient than direct malacha. Example would be, what is it? The example of grama, of causing something indirect. Okay, this we have to go into this example, not so simple. Setting up something before Shabbos that will result in fire or electricity activating during the Shabbos, which is what we spoke about. Aaron spoke about setting up a Shabbos clock for air conditioning or ovens, etc. So ovens, obviously, Shabbos not allowed, but Yom Tiv. But we do have Shabbos clocks, right? So Shabbos clock is permitted on Shabbos. So it's not exactly a great example because we have the Shabbos clock that turns on and off the lights on Shabbos. Yes, Aaron.
What about, because I have the Israeli, made in Israel, the plate that doesn't have any knobs on it. You plug it in, it turns on, it's one temperature, and then it turns off. You can or you can't use a Shabbos clock.
Say that again?
Okay. I have a hot plate. It's the Israeli one. It has no knobs, nothing. You plug it in, it's on, you unplug it, it's off, and it keeps your food warm. So could you use a Shabbos clock or not?
To plug in, let's say your hot plate on Shabbos, to go on Shabbos clock.
So you plug it into a Shabbos clock instead of directly into the wall.
On Shabbos to plug it into Shabbos clock?
No, you do this all. You set this all up before Shabbos. But my question is that allowed on Shabbos to turn on and off?
Yeah, the problem with the hot plate on Shabbos is is that one of the conditions of the hot plate is that for the foods that have to remain on it the whole Shabbos, if you have the hot plate set up in such a way, like we learned the examples given of pots on top of pots, where things that are not liquidized, like even like I saw the halachas even putting on dry ice, that's on frozen chalas, that will melt and become liquidized. Like going on a blech could be problematic. But let's say the things that you're allowed to place on Shabbos on a hot plate. So that's one thing. But to have, just like you would have your cholent sitting there, and then that's stone cold, and that could be a problem, because then you're mamish starting the cooking on Shabbos. Even if you put in this, that's what he's talking about. Even if you put in, that would be a good example. And I'm not sure this example that was put up by the computer is accurate, because first of all, we have Shabbos clocks all the time, and second of all, grama would only be a prohibition if you caused the grama on Shabbos itself. But here you plugged it in before Shabbos, so it's different. To plug in something to a Shabbos clock on Shabbos could be grama, but to plug in before Shabbos is differently. Yes, Barbara.
I was thinking maybe because I have a dishwasher that has a Shabbat cycle, and you can set it up before Shabbat so that when you load it, it'll come on at a certain time and it'll wash the dishes. So that's not allowed.
You have a Shabbos mode on the dishwasher?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, the problem obviously with the dishwasher would be if you're washing dishes that are not needed for Shabbos, but and there's no lights or anything that goes on and off, or like a lot of these dishwashers have lights that go on when you open the door. But let's say they didn't have any of that, and it's just set up to wash the dishes on Shabbos, and it's set on Shabbos mode. I have to check into that. I don't think that's grama. Grama would be a case of the grama itself has to be done on Shabbos.
Okay.
If you're causing something that will happen on Shabbos, that will cause a prohibition on Shabbos. But the whole idea of the Shabbos clock is that you're setting it up before Shabbos. So it's not when you're setting it up, it's not Shabbos, and you're just setting it at the Shabbos clock. I mean, every single Shabbos clock, the system is based on the idea that at certain times the electricity goes on and off. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, so there is this rabbi. Well, in Israel, you probably know there is a scientific group, and they make things scientifically that will be for Shabbos. And there's this rabbi, I don't know his name, so don't ask, but he says, I kosher them, make them kosher for Shabbos. 100% kosher, these items. But when asking me if I would use them, I always say no, because it doesn't bring the spirit of Shabbos.
Okay, so but that's his own opinion. The rabbis that the institute is the Halpern Institute, that they've operated the Shabbos elevators, and some Barbara, you were talking about the Shabbos vehicles that are permitted on Shabbos. So the spirit of Shabbos is good for someone who is able to use other options. For instance, some people will be cautious not to take a Shabbos elevator. That is their decision to do it. But if you're talking about people that can't take steps, or can't or too elderly, what have you, it's nothing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with those machineries that have been set up by the Halpern Institute to be Shabbos permitted to be used. And there is a bit of an issue when people say about when they try to lessen or kind of question the Shabbos spirit of these things that could kind of make other people feel uncomfortable who have no choices. So a person has a private choice, that's private. It's best in these situations to keep it private, and not make a deal about it or make other people feel bad. I'll tell you, one second before I need to go to your question. When I first came to Eretz Yisrael, we lived on the 13th floor, and I didn't take the Shabbos elevator. I walked 13 flights. I was a young strapping young lad that walked 13. So and I forced and my a lot of my guests also would do it. We were young chevra, and there was my neighbor was an elderly person. He should live long. He's still Baruch Hashem alive, I think so. And he came to me and he says, "I'm offended that you don't use the Shabbos elevator." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, by you not using the Shabbos elevator, you're making me feel uncomfortable." So I'm not sure. I didn't really subscribe to his idea on that, but he had some sort of point. That what but so you have to be careful. So again, to make it mandatory that everyone use the Shabbos elevator, that's obviously not right. And I'm entitled to take the steps if I choose. That aside, to make a big deal about it, to make the person feel uncomfortable, also is not the right way to go. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, the rabbi of the preschool when my kids were little said to me, because he knows my building had a Shabbos elevator slash if it ever broke down, the guy at
The
the
Gentile.
guard station, yeah, Gentile guard station, saw yarmulkes. He knew our floors and he did everything for us without us even asking. To this day, he still does it because for whatever reason. Okay, but the point is, and people set it up before Shabbos so he can send the elevator up at the proper time so you can get down because there's a lot of elderly people. But anyways, the thing is that the rabbi told me you could use the elevator, but what if it's a load bearing one? So more power if there's more people on it, so then you'd make it use more power because the weight. And then I said to him, okay, so at that time it didn't bother me to walk 12 flights of stairs like you said, but I still wanted to use it. But I said, what about the people who can't walk up those stairs? He said it's a problem. And I just never brought the subject up because as you said, I don't want to find something and then tell everyone that they can't use it. I figured if you have a walker, you could use it no matter what. You're not touching it.
The question of Amir al-Nakhri or the Gentile doing something for you, even if if he has no benefit, and a lot of the buildings in Manhattan run on that system. Everyone should ask their local rabbi. It's not so simple. No, it's not so simple. So I'm not going to give a psak on that at all. It's not in my league. But you would have to ask your rabbi. I know a lot of people do use what's called that kula. They use that leniency to have the doorman without being asked to open the elevator. It's not simple. It could be possibly problematic. Best to consult with your local rabbi.
Yeah, but what about the load bearing?
The load bearing is only a problem if the Shabbos elevator is created to have a single amount of energy, no matter if it's full or empty. That's why it consumes a lot of electricity. Let's say an elevator could handle 8 people. Let's say the elevator could handle 500 pounds, right? So hypothetically, so if it has 10 pounds, it uses some X amount of electricity. If it has the 500 pounds, it has to use more electricity. The Shabbos elevator is created in such a way where no matter what, it goes up and down using the full amount of electricity. So it's a big expense on the building, because it's running at full capacity every time, whether it's empty or full. That's why most people will have times for the Shabbos elevator. They don't have it running the full day, even the ones that have 2 elevators. That said, again, you have to ask your rabbi. The load barrier is the problem is that when you go in the elevator, even if the Gentile is pushing it, the fact that you're standing there causes it to use more electricity. That's the issue.
Okay, so this is what I think. It's just my opinion. No rabbi told me any of this. There's guys in my building that without the elevator, they can't get to shul. So I say in my head, let them do it and let them enjoy Shabbos in the shul.
If they're not asking you any questions, then it's not your place to start giving opinions.
I didn't give any. No one's asking me.
And if they want to ask, they should ask the rabbi in their
I'm just telling you in this class.
Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, let's just finish off this little chart here. Again, the chart is not 100% accurate. I don't think it's accurate on the grama, but let's just continue. Muksa, so we're just getting the ideas. The muksa, we're going to get more into details of this in the second part of this general class when we get to Shemirath Shabbos Kehilchatah. Okay, the muksa is set aside items. Definition: items that one does not plan to use on Shabbos, so you set them aside. You have no plans to use them, or if they're not part of your regular, you haven't made them usable. This is mainly stuff that we deal with Yom Tif or Shabbos. That is, he says, that are therefore forbidden to move. Types of are muksa machmas gufay, that inherently unusable, like rocks. Muksa machas iser, set aside because it's forbidden. In other words, candles before it's extinguished, the candle itself, it's usher. You're not allowed to touch it. So there's a prohibition in the article itself, or that there's nothing wrong with the stone, but you're not supposed to be using. You have no intention to use it. So because it wasn't part of your usable things, you cannot touch it on Shabbos. Kli shemalachtel iser, which is electronic or something that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. So even to hold it for something that's not of its use. Tools meant for malacha may not be moved, may be moved if needed, but you can't just use them just to hold them just like that. Status, entirely rabbinic, exceptions made for great need, using the space, means if it's in the space that you need. Obviously makes a difference if it's something if there's a fire on it. Moving with a shinoi, there's the idea of moving something in its unusual way, like with the back of your hand, etc. Let's just finish off uvdin dachol. What does it mean? Weekday-like activities. Definition: permitted acts that are too mundane, business-like, or violations of the spirit of Shabbos. Examples: doing professional measurements, extensive business discussions, which is not allowed, fixing appliances in a non-melacha way, which is you spending your Shabbos to do things that you shouldn't be doing in the spirit of Shabbos. Status, rabbinic prohibition based on maintaining the Shabbos atmosphere, menucha and kedusha. That's what Shabbos is meant for. Aaron, 1 second. Let's just do the summary chart. Let's see. Melacha d'oraisa, which is Torah, and it's, for instance, cooking and writing, full Torah violation. Tulda, which is a subtype, frying, cooking, planting seeds, Torah violation. Melacha d'rabbanan, rabbinic, playing music, asking a Gentile is rabbinic. Shavus, rabbinic, climbing a tree, business talk, rabbinic. Shvus, the shvus is a double rabbinic. For instance, a non-Jew to do a rabbinic act, rabbinic sometimes allowed. Meltag, I'm not sure what that is. Meltag. Melacha she'ein yisrachel legufa. Sorry, it's an abbreviation. If you don't have any need for what's being done, for instance, the dragging the bench, disputed rabbinic or Torah, psik reish delay nichale. If it means if it's something that's going to happen for sure, but it's not, you have no interest in it, is opening door, causing lights to go on. For instance, the example, that's a good example. If the idea of when you walk by, are you allowed to walk by houses that have sensories on them that for sure that your neighbor has a sensory light, and if you walk by, it turns the light on. You have no interest in the light. That doesn't benefit you any way, but it's an absolute certainty that it's going to go on. So that would be an example of psik reisha delay nichale. It's going to happen. Psik reisha means it's for sure going to happen. But delay nichale, I have absolutely no interest in what happens. It's irrelevant to me if the light goes on. It could possibly even be annoying. So that's rabbinic, like opening doors, causing light. That's rabbinic.
What if you can't stop from passing it?
If you could walk around, is always the best. There are some people who go into that there is such a concept where it's like literally that where you could, in the sensory lights, there are some people that are lenient because it's like literally, it's not just psik reisha layamas, it's just, it's, you're doing your thing. But if you can be careful to not, if you could get around it, you're supposed to try to get around it. Let's say your neighbor has it and you could cross the street, but if you forget sometimes, or if you didn't know, if you come to a new place. Grama is indirectly triggering electricity, but that's questionable if that's a problem, if it's done before Shabbos. Muktzah, something, moving tools, money that you don't need. Uvzin the fixing glasses, let's say without tools, would be an example of doing something that you're not doing anything that's forbidden on Shabbos, but it's not in the spirit of Shabbos. Okay, I'm gonna go. I have to leave a little early today, so let's do one more malach let's do one more law in the actual text. Okay, sorry for that long distraction, but I just wanted to get some ideas of the different levels of, we're mentioning all these different prohibitions and what they fall under, so we should just have a basic idea of what these things are. We did it a little fast. We'll do it more in depth when we get to the second part of this class. Lamed Beis, Leiv. So it says, Beged v'kiyotze bei sheishel of eze lichluch. If you have a garment that has some stain, mekanche bismartut v'kiyotze bei, you could wipe it off with a rag or something similar. You should not pour water on your clothing, because by pouring water on the clothing, it's like washing your clothing, which is a prohibition. Let's say your child has urinated on your clothing, or his clothing, her clothing. You can't pour water. If you could, again, you have to be careful about what kind of ground. If it could cause planting is a problem. But if you're talking about a dry area where there's no concern of planting and there's urine there, you can't spill water, not in a way of mopping, but just to kind of push the urine away. What happens when you want to wash your hands and dry your hands on a towel? Right? So is that are you making the towel wet? Is that considered like washing? Better to get rid of the water as best as possible before you dry the remaining moisture from your hands. So if your hands are soaking wet, better to have them kind of shake off So you're not like that would be like a one of the laws that we said. It's not a deraisa. It's not like you're definitely not your intention to wash the garment, but better to have less water on your hands than to be considered possibly the idea of washing the towel. Because over here it's just a little water, and it was actually you're cleaning your hands, not so it was dirty in the first place. It's different. That's only talking about white towels, but colored towels are less of a problem because that's not how one washes them. All right, let's just do the footnotes on this, and we'll finish the class. Open up to quick questions. I have about 5 minutes left. It says it may be wiped lightly so as not to squeeze the dirt oil out of the garment. So even when you wipe it, don't wipe it hard. You have to wipe it lightly with a dry towel. Number 122. This rule applies to other liquids as well, not just water. 123. See paragraph 40 for details about leather plastic. Okay, we will get to 40 later. 124 is Shulchan Aruch 302.10. This, which is talking about when you dry your hands to try to get rid of the water first, to try to dry off your hands before you hit the actual towel. So this ruling accommodates the opinion of the Yarim that even as part of the soiling process, it is forbidden even if the towel is clean anyways. This is a proper custom, but according to halacha, it's permitted to dry your hands even when all the water is on it, and even with an unclean towel. So even if the towel is unclean and looks like you're cleaning the towel, at the end of the day that's one's allowed to do that, then one should not be concerned. Okay, a few minutes for questions. Anyone before we close the class?
Yeah. I have a question.
Go ahead.
So in many religious publications, the whole reason they get published is because people place ads in them and they give them away for free. So their money making is ads. But I've seen in one, it said, don't read the ads on Shabbos. How can you're going to see the ad when you're flipping through it. And you're going to read a Torah portion and it's going to describe the Torah to you for some rabbi. But in between it, there's these ads. So how do you avoid them?
And you're concerned about the ads? Why?
No, it says on the publication, it says, don't read the ads on Shabbos.
Okay. So then we learn in Chassidus about iskafia, about restraining yourself. So exercise restraint and not focusing on the ad. To glance at an ad is okay. Nothing you can do about that. He means to look at and study it and plan in your head based on the ad. The concern is it's obviously not in the spirit of Shabbos.
Can I just interject? What Aaron's mentioning is like a big issue. We have these magazines here. They're I mean, they come out like a few days before Shabbos. They know that everybody's reading the magazine on Shabbos, and the magazine is more advertisements than any other kind of article. So like it's like they know the halacha, but they want to sell the ads. So it's like really, I feel like it's really the wrong thing.
That's a good point. It's a good point. You're saying I mean, you're basically saying it's not in the spirit of Shabbos, and they know that it's going to be used on Shabbos. They're just kind of covering their halachic obligations of telling you not to read it on Shabbos, and then leaving it up to the reader.
Yeah, because I mean, like everybody's like, if you see a good deal or something you want to buy, like, okay, you might not plan like what time and what day you're going to go to that store, but of course it's going to like stand out in your mind that you want to get that product or you want to look on their website or whatever. Like, I feel like it's not reasonable to ask people to like to read the magazine on Shabbos and like totally ignore like 60 pages of ads,
She's right about that. But the article that's Jewish is very good, and it's a famous rabbi in Brooklyn.
Okay, listen. I hear what you're all saying, and it's a good. These are good questions, and it's annoying. If I had the opportunity to take it up with the publishing house, I would. I'm quite certain that the issue over here is that it's kind of the chicken and egg, because their argument would be that the only ability to put the publication out is supported by the ads. And so therefore they're in the on the good side, they're able to give you a Dvar Torah for Shabbos. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the ability. They couldn't afford to put it out for free. And the other side is the concern the person is going to study the ad. So how do you have both go together? And obviously, the person who's putting the ad in the paper wants you to study that. Otherwise, there's no point in putting money there. So there's kind of this chicken and egg. Maybe this whole tension of looking at that, not looking at the ad, would have both the benefit of after Shabbos, you checking the ads, or before Shabbos, marking down the ads that you like. I mean, there's ways, if you really want to be careful about it, that you could give yourself, study the ads before Shabbos, so by the time it comes Shabbos, you're not paying attention to that. Although I know that's not practical because a lot of people don't have the time to do all that extra effort on Shabbos. But I'm trying to just put together what probably the rabbinic authorities that permit this are thinking that at the end of the day is the only way for the Torah to come out is going to be for these people to have the ads published in the publication. But at the same time, like you said, there's it causes violation of Shabbos. So for the reader's sake, you have choices. One is not to buy them, and two is not to read them on Shabbos. Or three is to figure out strategies for yourself to either check Matzah Shabbos the ads or check them on Friday. But if all that is uncomfortable and not doable and too stressful, best is maybe not to read it at all. But if the reason the publications are obviously doing it is because that's their only way of publishing, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to afford to do it. So it's up to the reader, so to say, what they're throwing it at the reader to figure out a strategy to keep the Shabbos and not be distracted by the ads, although it's very difficult.
Can I ask a question?
Well, quickly.
So not relating to ads or anything, but let's say there's a really big article that you don't have time to read on Shabbos and you want to read or you want to save it or something. Are you allowed to fold it over or stick something in there, or is that considered like hachana, like planning for after Shabbos?
Excellent question. And it's again, these are and I can't say with certainty that everyone's careful on that, but all these things are, of course, better not to do because you're preparing for Shabbos. It's not in the spirit of Shabbos. To get back to it, obviously, if you read most of it and you want to just continue reading it, it's a bookmark. You allowed to put a bookmark in on Shabbos. That's you're reading your book. Permissible book on Shabbos, and you're holding in your middle. You want to put a bookmark. Are you allowed to do it on Shabbos? You're preparing for the next time you read it, and you may not read it on Shabbos. So again, this is all. We did have the idea that there's certain things that cause stress that in itself is not Shabbosdik. So, like for instance, someone who doesn't like the dirty dishes on Shabbos causes a person stress. So then there's those who are lenient to say you could clean your house because that's part of your menucha. So again, we don't that doesn't apply to straight up violations of Shabbos. But if something is a question of uvdin l'chol, if something of Shabbosdik or preparation for Matzah Shabbos, like washing the dishes, but it enhances your Shabbos experience, then there's a discussion there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we'll see you, Bez Hashem, for this class next week.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rabbi.